giving you useful and practical tips to help you make more money selling travel. This is the Art of Selling Travel Podcast, and here to guide you through it all, your host, Glenda Beagle.
Hey, oh my goodness, I cannot believe it. We are recording episode 100. Now, if you're one of those like extra keeners, you might look on the app and see that it actually shows 104 episodes today. But we're not counting the bonus episodes, the actual recorded episodes. This is 100. Okay, so here's the thing. If you would have told me back when I started I was going to hit 100, I would have laughed at you. Now, there's part of me that was like, of course I would. Of course I would. And then we actually went through the process of building a podcast, recording it all the time and sending it out and all of the things that are involved in it. And I bet you probably by about episode 12, I would have been like, it's never going to happen. It's just not. Because it's a lot of work, yet it's also not to create a podcast. You know, just sort of like marketing in your business is a lot of work, but yet it's not. It's simply doing this one thing, or it's simply putting something up on social, or it's simply doing whatever. When I record a podcast, I just sit in front of my computer and I talk to, well, frankly, myself. But more importantly, I'm talking to you. And it's just you don't get to answer me in real time. But this episode, I actually made the notes for back when I was on the cruise a couple of months back. And so it gave me some time to think on it, because here's the thing. I wanted to share some of the lessons that I've learned since I started this podcast. And the reality is I'm not the same person I was when I started, which is a good thing, because in reality, we started this podcast over 3 years ago. We took a few breaks. That's why it took a little longer than it should have to get to 100 episodes, but we're here. But it did change a lot of things, and a lot of it was definitely for the better. And that's mostly because of travel advisors just like you. The DMs that I get, the messages that I get, or even just simply the interaction in person. This fall, I got to travel and present live in person at multiple places. In fact, this sounds totally weird to say, I got to give presentations in 4 countries between September and October, and it was unbelievable. But more importantly was every time somebody came up and they would say, I came to this event just because you were going to be here, because I listen to you all the time and I'm so excited to be able to come and like learn in person. That means the world to me. I actually kind of laugh because I remember the first time I did a sales call for Curious to Booked, and Rick, and I'm going to say his name because we laugh about this all the time. And Rick gets on the call and he just says, I'm such a fan. I kid you not. I looked at him and I said, of what? He's like, you. And I answered with the most honest thing without even thinking, because sometimes if you've been around a while, you know, sometimes I will say something without thinking it all the way through. And I looked him deadpan in the Zoom camera and said, why? Because it was the first time somebody had ever said they were a fan of mine. And, you know, it was really and truly, even though I had seen the DMs and had conversations with people and whatnot, this was kind of that first time in the wild, as I've heard it referred to, that somebody actually in person, if you will, talked about being a fan. And it just never occurred to me. It never even remotely occurred to me that that was a possibility. That, yeah, like when he said, I'm such a fan, I legit had no idea what he was talking about. Like, no idea. And so I still laugh at it. I remember going upstairs that day because I was working out of my office in my basement. And I said to my husband, I'm like, I think I screwed that up. And so I told him the story and he just laughed. He's like, no, because if they listen to your podcast, I'm sure that's exactly what they were expecting to hear. But it's one of those things that you don't always know somebody's paying attention. Whether it's your social media, whether it's your emails, whatever it is, I want you to use this episode as a reminder that somebody is watching. Somebody is paying attention to you. I get it. Putting up social media content is hard. Trying to come up with what to say, trying to come up with what images, what this, what that, everything else. Sometimes we overthink it and then overthink it to the point we don't even put it out. I was overthinking the podcast episodes for so long that we had really big gaps in the beginning. And yet, once I just leaned into it and I'm like, no, we're going to show up. Basically, that come hell or high water, we're doing this. And then lo and behold, the DMs start coming. The messages start coming. People start saying they're a fan. It still feels weird. It feels so weird. And yet I am so honored when people tell me the stories of how they're driving around or they're walking. They go for a walk every day and they listen to my podcast. It's an honor. And I don't want to ever minimize that because it's so, I am just truly honored that I get to have a little bit of your time because I know how precious that resource is. And so I never want to ever take that for granted. And so when you're working on your socials, when you're creating whatever it is you're creating, remember that whoever's on the other line, whoever's on the other end, maybe it's on their cell phones, maybe it's at their desk reading their emails, whatever it is, make sure that what you're giving them is worthy of the time that they're giving you. And when you do it from an act of service, how can you help them? How can you create something that's going to solve a problem? You are not solving all of the world's problems in one shot. You're just wanting to make sure somebody feels seen, somebody feels heard, and somebody feels a part of a community. That's all you got to do. A simple did you know? Maybe you don't know this. Maybe but I was this many years old when I learned, or this many days old when I learned this. Whatever it is, how can you help somebody? How can you help somebody overcome a struggle and then share a story of that struggle so that you can help the next person not even have to get into that struggle? Social media, marketing, all of the things, even sales. We put so much emphasis on it, thinking it has to be this perfect being. Problem is, perfection's a freaking illusion. It doesn't exist. First off, the goalpost for perfection is constantly moving, like constantly. If you have an idea of what perfection is, I promise you, as you get closer to it, the goalpost moves. Because you'll realize that what you thought was perfect is no longer perfect. And therefore, you got to move it again. So just get it done. In the early time of doing the podcast, I used to think that if I chased squirrels or if I went off on a wild tangent, I was ruining the podcast. So I used to delete those episodes. I can't tell you how many episodes I'm like, oh, went off on another tangent, chased another squirrel, got to stop doing that. And I would delete the episode or I would simply not publish it at all. And then it would get lost into the wherever. And then I was doing a live training for a company. It was a live webinar and travel advisors from all over were invited. And I guess somewhere is in there, I said, hang on, I got to chase a squirrel. But at the end of the webinar, I was able to download all of the comments because I had promised that I was going to answer all of those questions in socials. Like if I didn't get a chance to get through your question, go ahead, drop them in the comments, and I'm going to put them up on my socials over the next few days and answer those questions for you. Well, I can tell you at exactly what point I said, hang on, I'm going to chase a squirrel because the comments went crazy. OMG, that's my favorite part of her podcast. Have you ever listened to her podcast? Like when she chases a squirrel, that's where you got to go. I know. As soon as she says, I'm going to chase a squirrel, I got to grab a pen and paper because I know it's about to get good. And all of these sorts of things, all of these comments that were there was a whole string of them. And see, what I thought was my biggest weakness was my biggest strength. And what is the one thing that is? It's a human flaw. And when you have a human flaw, guess what? It makes you human. It makes you relatable. It makes you someone people can connect with. Is everybody going to connect with my chasing squirrels? Heck no. And I'm okay with that. But yet the ones that do show up and say, I'm such a fan. Because it's those chasing the squirrels, that lack of perfection, if you will, that brings them back time and time again. Your marketing does not have to be perfect because perfect does not exist. And if we're holding ourselves to this world of perfection, we're never going to get there. In fact, as we are moving in, Instagram is the one that's taking the longest to catch up. But the other ones have this wild fascination with authenticity. Like not, okay, I'm going to be as authentic as I have ever been. No, you're not. You say that, you are not authentic. If you have to tell people you're authentic, you are not authentic. You just got to show up. You've got to have a conversation in the way you would have a conversation if they picked up the phone and called you. How would you sound? How would you talk? How would you answer their question? That's what needs to show up on social. These perfectly curated, stunning stock photos that everybody else is using. No, that's not what the algorithm is going for anymore. The algorithm is going for showing up as a human, putting your face in front of a camera. Okay, I should get back to my lessons. We've been chasing a lot of squirrels. That's why I wrote them out today. So perfection is an illusion. The next one is you can get better and you will get better. When I have travel advisors that reach out and they're like, so I started at the beginning of your podcast and I'm working all the way through. I'm like, oh, no, don't go back to the beginning episodes. They're awful. But you know, the reality is the one person said it the best. And she said, when I go back to the beginning, because I said to her, I'm like, oh no, I was terrible in the beginning. She goes, I feel like I got to grow with you because I'm new in the industry. And as you went along, I got to grow up with you. And that actually right there totally changed my perspective on it. And no matter what you do, whether it's doing videos, doing social media posts, doing emails, doing whatever it is, freaking get started when you have little or no audience or when nobody's paying attention. Why? Because it gives you room to suck. Because unless you are classically trained, and I think that's like the term they refer to as like ballerinas or something like that, you're going to suck. You're going to fall down. You're going to screw something up. I'd rather do it when nobody was watching. When I first started my podcast, I was getting 8 downloads a week. 6 of them may have come from devices within my own home. But that meant 2 other people somewheres, they might have been friends, were listening. But as we've gone on, we get upwards of 1,000 downloads a week and even crossing over 1,000 from time to time. And I've had other people, they're like, oh, that's all you get. I'm like, hey, I don't care. I am getting 1,000 people a week listening to me. I am getting 1,000 people a week who are taking time out of their world, out of their space. They only get so much time. And I am truly honored by them. And so I don't need giant numbers. I just want to make sure they show up again next week and the week after. So you will get better. The next lesson was consistency matters. Okay, so full disclosure, I was not consistent when I started the podcast. I'd be like, "Hey, here's 5 weeks in a row. Look at me. Oh, I missed that one. Oh, well, if I missed that one, I can miss this one. Oh, I don't know what to say. Oh, I did a lot of squirrel chasing. Forget it." And then it would pop back up and I'm like, "Hey, I'm back. I'm going to be consistent." And that would last for 3, 4, 6 weeks. And then we would drop off. And then I think it was May of 23, we hit it consistently where we dropped an episode every single week, to the point I had a week or two where I didn't have the podcast recorded. So I was recording it at 11:30 at night to make sure it still went out that day because I was committed to it. Now, when you have a podcast, and people are subscribed. By the way, if you're not yet subscribed to the podcast, make sure you hit the subscribe within your app there. But even though it automatically feeds into their podcast app, I would get a certain amount of downloads, but unless I sent an email saying, "Hey, the podcast has dropped," it stayed at a certain amount. Every time they would open their app, if that was one of the more recent ones, it would pop right up in front of them. They were already subscribed to it. Yet it was the emails that I sent that changed how many downloads I got. And so I did great. I got really consistent with the podcast. I was not as consistent with the emails going out, reminding people what was there, reminding people to open it up, reminding people to go take a listen. I even had people that would send me emails because I hadn't sent out an email. They're like, "Did you start putting out the podcast again? Because I haven't gotten an email that you have one." I'm like, "Oh my goodness." And then for a presentation I did in Toronto, I was looking, and it just ended up becoming part of the presentation because I had looked at it. But I had been looking at my results because my podcast had dropped right off. And I'm like, "What are we doing? Why are we only getting why did our downloads drop in half? Like, why are we only getting 500 downloads a week?" And then I started looking back. Oh, look at that spike. Yep, sent an email that week. Oh, look at that spike. Sent an email that week. Okay, all of these flat weeks, those were the weeks I didn't send one. Consistency matters. The frequency of when you put out the episodes, whether you're talking social media, whether you're talking emails, whatever it is, the consistency and the frequency of when you do it. The weekly email was a huge game changer. You've got to have the personal, professional self-commitments. You've got to be committed to yourself. Stop making the excuses, even if it meant posting at midnight. It's easier to keep the momentum going than to start over. I am on a little bit of a thing right now where I am back on I got to do 10,000 steps. And with this update that I have with my Fitbit, it tells me what my streak is. So as of today, I think I am on day 86 of having hit my 10,000 steps in a row. You know, when we were like less than 10, it was like, if I miss it, I miss it. Now that we are coming close to 100 days straight, like we're at day 86, it's a big deal. Like to the point at 11:30 at night, I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I have to check my Fitbit just to make sure." Last night, my heart failure, because I remembered at 12:02 a.m. to take a look. And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, it's 12:02." So that I had to like open the app, and I kept my eyes closed as I was opening it because I'm like, "Please, please, 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 please don't have missed." And the reason for that is because the momentum is easier to keep you going. I don't want to miss out on day 87 when I'm already at day 86. But if I lose it and the momentum stops and that train's got to go back to the station and start over again, it's real hard to get that motivation going on day 1 to get you to day 2. Because, so I missed this day. That's fine. I ache. I have this. I have that. I'm too busy. I'm blah, 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 blah. Whatever it is. Motivation, not a thing. Momentum is. So you have to decide what you're going to do to get going. Are you going to send that email? Are you going to start doing daily social media posts? What are you going to commit to do every single day? And how are you going to get the first day started so that you can get the momentum built into the second, into the third, into the fourth? The next lesson, some people are going to love you. Others are going to seek to take you down. Hello, internet trolls. Choose who you want to listen to. If you have hit this with one of my business coaches, this is what I love about his community, the celebration of trolls, because he is a huge believer in that you have not hit a major business milestone unless and until you get trolled. And so there is like a celebration party inside of his Facebook group for everybody who gets their first troll. And it is wild the way that we celebrate this, because you haven't made it until you've been trolled. And yet at the same time, if you focus on that troll and you consume it too deeply, you're letting one other person's opinion take you down. Now, I'm also going to say don't ignore them. They may point out a blind spot, but they're not the only voice to listen to. If you are trolled, if there's a negative out there, take a moment and say, okay, is there something I've missed? And you have to be really objective with this. And if that means that if you need to send me a DM over on Art of Selling Travel on Instagram, or come into our Facebook group, The Sticky Sales Scenario, if you get trolled, post it. And if you want to do it quietly, send me a DM on Instagram. Let me know what it is. I can ask you the questions. We can go through to see if there's a moment of self-reflection, because sometimes we all got to do a little self-reflection. But then I want you to shake it off, because they are not the only voice to listen to. The next lesson was that the journey may take longer than we want, but it doesn't mean it's not working. I tell you, it took a long freaking time for this podcast to pick up steam. And now, like I said, when I was on the road in September, October, and the amount of people are like, oh my goodness, I get to meet you. Like, I listen to your podcast all the time. I was in Calgary and ran into somebody, or got to have supper with somebody. She listens to the podcast, and lo and behold, she grew up in the same town my husband did. And she knew him. And so that was just totally wild. And, here's the deal. It shows you how small the world really is. That we all have connections. We're all craving connection. When I am recording podcasts, and definitely as we get back into the summer months here in Canada, I am definitely going to make sure that when she is riding her lawnmower, that those episodes are worthy of finishing the whole lawn, because I want to make sure that we are pumping as much value in as possible. I actually, I've had this imaginary goal, if you will. And this week I sent it to a couple of friends, and I can't actually believe I'm going to admit this out loud, but here's the scoop. I am putting it out there because that's how things happen, is you actually have to put it out into the universe. You actually have to put it out. And it's also it's about the journey, because the story isn't about the destination. It's about the journey that gets you there. And I have always wanted to be a godmother of a ship. I'm like, a river cruise would be super cool. But I remember thinking that 15 years ago. I'm thinking that would be so cool. But who am I? Who am I? And this week I said to my friends, I said, that's my goal. And of course, a couple of them are like, I have no idea what that means. I'm like, that's okay. You don't have to know what that means. And so the one said, how do you do it? I said, the actual mechanics of being selected, I have no idea. But I said, I know that in order to be selected, I have to have made an impact. And so for me, that is going to become what my vision, what my goal for my business is. However, it's sort of like one of those values, if you will, because to me, the only way to achieve it is by helping travel advisors, the travel industry, the travel community to be able to build and grow the type of business that they want, that they deserve, and help them flourish. And so for me, it's all about the journey. If it ever happens, trust me, I will celebrate. And I promise you, you are all invited. We'll just do like a giant cruise together. But the thing is it's not about the destination. It's about the journey. And that reframing, when I put it out there, because I'm like, again, there's still a moment where I'm like, who the hell am I to be asking for that? Who am I to put that out there? Nobody even knows who I am. Isn't that funny, the stories we tell ourselves? Yet I can go out into these events and people are like, oh my goodness, I came because you're here. But to me, the way that happens is that I get to create an impact in a travel advisor just like you, whether you are brand new, still in the planning processes, or you have been in business for 20, 30 years and we are working on scaling and working on growing your business or working to succeed your business, where you are beginning your succession planning. So if I keep my focus on, and I think it's Zig Ziglar, you will get everything you want when you help others get everything that they want. And I don't think that there'd be anything more true. So in a big lofty world, one day it would be absolutely amazing to be named a godmother. But in this world, I am so freaking pumped that I am building a business that is in alignment with the values of somebody that I think is deserving of becoming a godmother. And therefore, that's how I'm going to live my business. Again, the journey is going to take longer than we want. I don't know if that journey is ever going to complete. I don't know if we're ever going to make it to that destination. Trust me, that won't be the end of our journey. But I don't know if we're ever going to get to that pit stop. And sure, are there going to be times when we sit there and go, are we there yet? But it's about the journey. And that's where my focus is. How can I help you to grow your business? How can I help you to grow your sales, build your business, bring in more clients? What does that look like? In fact, if you are looking for help, send me a message on Instagram, send me an email. We'll link it all up. I would love to have a conversation with you. The next lesson is that business is an inside job. We think it's strictly sales and marketing, but in reality, so many want to in business with the comfort of employee rules. They want to be in business, but they want that comfort of what it takes to be an employee, where somebody else is going to make the hard decisions. Somebody else is going to do the hard work. And a lot of employees are not scared of the hard work, but they're scared of leaping and not knowing if the net will appear. Owning a business is not instant freedom and money. Yet so many of us, so many travel advisors, so many business owners as a whole will say, oh, I want to build my own business because I want to be free. I want to travel whenever I want. And I want all of these things. And guess what? That's not reality. Yes, one day, but that's not day one. And so we need to understand that we've got to get out of our own damn way. We've got to charge fees, and knowing that profit is not a bad word. Profit is a good thing in business. You are allowed to be profitable. In fact, if you are not profitable, you don't necessarily have a business. So you want to be okay with being profitable. Your business is only going to be able to grow to the level of which your mind allows. I definitely have had a slower journey than a lot of other coaches in the industry, or just a lot of people in business as a whole. And I'm okay with that because to me, I did the inside work. Because when I get trolled, I'm like, hey guys, guess what? I have my troll. Like, come check it out. And I laugh about it. And at the same time, I'm like, okay, they have a valid point. Yes, I should not do that. Huh. Okay. You know what? That's your opinion. That's not who I am. Like, it's not going to happen. But if you haven't done that internal work, that troll can destroy your momentum of the week. That troll can destroy what's going on. Now, I'm not going to say getting trolled by my family doesn't affect me. We're still working on that internal game. But the business, we're pretty solid. The family, we're still working on. But it's that reminder that your business can only grow to the level of which your mind allows. Because if every time you encounter an obstacle in your business, it shuts you down, you're not going to make ground very fast. That's how you take one step forward, two steps back. That's how you start to believe there's no more room for travel advisors. I can't charge fees because somebody else down the street does it. You can tell yourself any number of stories, but how about this? Next time, tell yourself the story of, yes, I can. I can totally do that. If they don't want to work with me, hallelujah, it made room for the people who do. Next lesson is just ask. You never know who will say yes. This year I had some exciting guests. I had Gina Tremarco. I totally fangirl on her. She is brilliant. She is an improv sales trainer, woman empowerment, but yet not in the. She is just straight to it. She is just get this stuff done. I love her. And then Liz Wilcox, she was actually on Survivor this year. And so I reached out to her because she has an email marketing membership and it's fabulous. And I reached out to her to talk about email. I'm going to link both of those episodes up in the show notes as well. But she is fabulous. And when I reached out, I got an instant yes. I was like, wow, all I had to do was ask. I've already got plans in the works for who's going to be coming up probably in the new year. Some of the speakers that were at Love Mexico, because they were so phenomenal. And I can't wait to put them in front of you. But you've got to ask. See, we can tell ourselves a story of, they would never come here. They would never. Why? Well, they're never going to if they don't know it's even possible. Next one was you got to listen to your gut, not your ego. Some people will call it intuition. Some people will call it your higher self. I'm just straight up. Listen to your gut, not your ego. Episodes that I almost didn't post. Well, that I wasn't going to post, but then I ended up. They were. Some of them, I swear, I was so close to deleting, and I'm like, I don't have time to record another one. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm going to post this, but there it goes. And yet they were the ones that had the most interaction. They were the ones that I got the most stories of. They were the ones that get referred to the most. And it cracks me up because every time somebody's like, I love that episode, I think, I can't believe I was going to delete that one. And why? Because some of them, my ego didn't want out there. My ego didn't like the fact that, that I talked about whatever I talked about, or that it caught me emotionally, or whatever it is. Some of these episodes really jump all over the place. And the reason being, because sometimes I've recorded without any plan in mind, or I recorded an episode with an outline written out, and I never looked at it. And it just came from within the gut, and away we went. I don't know if you can tell, these are not scripted. every once in a while, I'm sure you can tell when I'm reading a line because I'm like, and then I'm like, wait, I didn't spell that right. What is that word supposed to be? And yet I'm still trying to talk about it here. If we're not perfection, but we are heart and soul, and we are all about pouring into the travel community because I know inside of my mess is my message. But you've got to listen to your gut. When you create something, be it your social media, be it your emails, be it anything, you never know who it was that needed to hear that. You never know who needed to hear what you had to say. You never know when one of your audiences or somebody within your audience needed that permission to spend money on a vacation for themselves rather than on everybody else. It's also okay to ask for people to rate and review, be it the podcast. So, FYI, if you are loving the podcast, please go on to, I think you can do it in iTunes. There's a couple other places you can do it, or Apple Podcasts. I don't know what they call it anymore. Rate and review it. Let other people know why they should be listening. It would be so eternally grateful if you could please leave us a 5-star review. If it's not a 5-star, send me a DM. I want to know why. I genuinely want to know why. I want to know how we can make it better. The next lesson was that if you never start, you will never know what's possible. I can't tell you how many ideas are trapped up inside of my head. And I'm going to be honest in the fact that some of them I haven't put out there because I know it's such a good idea that so long as it stays trapped in my head, it's still this little image of perfection because I know it's kind of my ace in the pocket. I know it's something I could do later if something. I have to stop doing that because it's about the journey. How can I help you? So in 2025, we have some new things coming. Doing Accelerate at Sea, we are doing a week-long cruise where we are going to spend a whole week together in November of 2025. I think at this point we have like a dozen spots left is all. I think that's what we're at. But we don't have very many seats left. We're going to have 3 full days in a classroom together, brainstorming, workshopping, learning from each other, having conversations, working through obstacles and objections in your travel business. It is going to be phenomenal. And then, of course, we have all the evenings to hang out together, talk shop, talk family, talk whatever it is you want to talk about. If you want to talk business, I kind of like enjoy that. So it is your opportunity to come have an entire week to ask me questions, get help in your travel business. It's something you're not going to want to miss out on. But here's the deal. It took me months to finally flip the switch on that because I had all these stories of, but what if nobody wants to come? What if this? What if that? And then I put it out there. People were like, me, please, me, please, me, please. And I was excited because I know what we're going to accomplish in that week. And then finally, and this may be the most important lesson that I've learned for myself in recording the podcast after 100 episodes. And this one's serious. The cat must always go to the sunroom on recording days, even if she's sleeping, because she knows when it is time to wake up and interrupt and come and meow into the microphone. I cannot tell you how many episodes we have had to re-record, had to work through, or frankly, I am sure if you have listened to all the episodes, you have heard her somewheres in there. She only allows me to talk for a certain amount of time. We are quickly coming to that time when she would otherwise come and interrupt. So with that, let me just say thank you. This 100 episodes is because of travel advisors who are just like you. People who are looking to start, people who are already in it, people who are growing, scaling, and looking to the next step. I just want to say thank you. Genuinely, honestly, Thank you. I couldn't have done it without you. And the episodes that are coming, I am so freaking pumped for them. So stay tuned. We're going to be back here next week. Same place, same time. Happy selling.